So this is question 2 of the My iMaths exercise on the quadratic formula. All of these questions are pretty much the same. They're all quadratic expression equal to 0. You've got to solve the quadratic equation using the formula. So they're all something x squared and something x and something on the end equal to 0. So they're all already in the right shape for just sticking the numbers in the formula. So let's get on with it. Let's move on to my whiteboard for the first one. So here is the first one. I've written it out already, and I've identified a as 1 because we've got 1x squared. It just says x squared, so that means 1x squared, a equals 1. We've got 3x, so b is 3, and we've got minus 3 on the end, so c is minus 3. So I've got to stick all of those numbers into the formula. X equals minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I'll start with a is 1, so wherever I see an a, I'm going to replace it with a 1. 1 there and 1 there. I'm sticking it in brackets, so 2 brackets 1 means 2 multiplied by 1. I'm using the brackets rather than a cross for multiplication because that looks a bit too much like an x and it's confusing. B is 3, so minus b here becomes a minus 3. B squared becomes 3 squared, and that's all the b's. And then c is minus 3, so I'm going to replace this c here with a minus 3, stick it in brackets. And then let's try and simplify this. So 2 times 1, that's fairly straightforward, is just 2. 3 squared is 3 times 3, which is 9. Now I've got 4 times 1 times minus 3. So all of that from the 4 to the end of the brackets makes minus 12. So I'm going to replace all of that with minus 12. But remember, there was already a minus there because there's a minus in the formula. So you've got a minus from the formula and a minus from minus 12. So that gives you 9 minus minus 12. Minus minus makes plus. So that's the same as 9 plus 12, which of course is 21. So that gives us x equals minus 3 plus or minus root 21 over 2. And that gives us the 2 different solutions. So one solution is with a plus here, or the other solution is with a minus there. I should have written a 2 there and a 2 there. So the plus and minus there gives us the 2 different solutions. Okay, well I'm going to get over to my scientific calculator now and punch that information in. So I'm on the mathematical typesetting calculator at desmos.com/scientific, and this allows you to type things in with the proper mathematical typesetting, so they look like they would look if you wrote them on paper. It's got a fraction button, it's got a square root button. So I typed in the minus 3 plus root 21 over 2, and it gave me 0.79, which I'm going to round to 0.8. Then all I need to do to get the other solution is to change the plus for a minus there in the plus minus, and that gives me minus 3.79, which I'm going to round to minus 3.8. So over to my iMaths. In fact, I've already typed those in, so we'll mark those later. And then on to the next question. X squared minus 3x minus 1 equals 0. So onto the whiteboard for that one. So I've already written this one out. X squared minus 3x minus 1 equals 0. So a equals 1 because we've got 1x squared. B is minus 3 because we've got minus 3x. C is minus 1 because we've got minus 1 on the end. So I'm going to take the formula. X equals minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, and just replace the a's, b's and c's with those actual values. So I'll start with the a's. A is 1, so wherever I see an a, I'm going to replace it with a 1. So that's that. B is minus 3, so wherever I see a b, I'm going to replace it with a minus 3. So the formula here says minus b, I'm going to replace the b with a minus 3, so I'm going to get minus minus 3, because there was already a minus there in the formula. And then b squared, so that's going to be minus 3 in brackets squared. So it's important that it's in brackets, because the minus is going to get squared as well, which will give you minus times minus makes plus. If you don't put the 3, or if you don't put the minus in the brackets, then you lose track of or you get an extra minus that you don't want. And then the c is minus 1, so I'll just replace that c with a minus 1, and let's start tidying this up. So 2 times 1 on the bottom, that's straightforward, that's 2. Minus minus 3, minus minus makes plus, so they cancel each other out, so they can go. Minus 3 squared, so that's minus 3 times minus 3, which is 9. Not minus 9, but 9, because minus times minus is making a plus. Okay, we've got 4 times 1 times minus 1 here, which makes minus 4. Then we've got another minus that was already in the formula, so we get 9 minus minus 4, which makes 9 plus 4. Minus minus makes plus. So 9 plus 4 is 13. So our answer is going to come from, or our two answers are going to come from 3 plus or minus root 13, all of that divided by 2. So x equals 3 plus root 13 over 2, or 3 minus root 13 over 2. Okay, I'm going to get over to my scientific calculator now. So I've already punched in the first one, 3 plus root 13 over 2, which gives me about 3.3. So let's put that in. 3.3. And then to get the other value, I've just got to change the plus for a minus there on the calculator. Don't have to do any more work. And then that gives me, well, minus 0.3 to the nearest one decimal place. So over to the iMaths, minus 0.3. And then we can go on to the next question. X squared minus 9x plus 6 equals 0. So I've written that all out. We've got x squared, or 1x squared, so a equals 1. We've got minus 9x, so b is minus 9. And we've got plus 6 on the end, so c equals 6. I'm going to stick all of that into the formula. X equals minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's start with a equals 1. Wherever I see an a, I'm going to replace it with a 1. So 1 there, 1 there. Let's do the b's. Wherever I see a b, I'm going to replace it with a minus 9. So I've got minus b there. So I'm going to replace the b with a minus 9. That's going to give me minus minus 9. So I need to be careful with that. And this b squared here, that's going to become minus 9 squared. And it's important that the minus 9 goes in brackets so that the minus bit is getting squared as well. Otherwise you'll lose track of a minus. Oh, and the c is 6, so let's replace that c with a 6. Okay, let's tidy this up. 2 times 1 on the bottom, that's just 2. Easy. Minus minus 9, well, minus minus makes plus, so they're cancelling each other out. Minus 9 squared. This is where you could lose track of a minus. So minus 9 times minus 9 gives you plus 81. So we get 81 there, not minus 81. And then 4 times 1 times 6 is 24. So I can replace all that last bit with 24. Then I've got 81 minus 24 inside the square root. So that's 57, isn't it? So I'm going to get the square root of 57. So my two solutions are going to come from 9 plus or minus the square root of 57, all of that divided by 2. So that's 9, x equals 9 plus root 57 over 2, or 9 minus root 57 over 2. Okay, over to the scientific calculator. So I've just punched in the first one, 9 plus root 57 over 2, and that's given me, well, that's going to round to 8.3, so I'll put that in iMaths, 8.3, and then to get the other solution I just need to swap that plus for a minus, and that gives me, well, that's going to round to 0.7, so over to the iMaths and 0.7. There we go. And on to the next question. 4x squared plus 3x minus 5 equals 0. Over to the whiteboard for that one. So I've written that out on my whiteboard. We've got 4x squared, so a is 4. We've got 3x, so b is 3. And we've got minus 5 on the end, so c is minus 5. I'm going to stick all of those numbers into the formula. X equals minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's start with the a's. A is 4, so wherever I see an a, I'm going to replace it with a 4. B is 3, so wherever I see a b, I'm going to replace it with a 3. So minus b becomes minus 3. B squared becomes 3 squared. And then c is minus 5, so where I see a c, I'm going to replace it with a minus 5. Just stick the whole thing in brackets so I don't forget the minus or get confused by it. Okay, let's tidy it up. 2 times 4 is 8, that's easy. 3 squared is 3 times 3, 9. 4 times 4, that's 16. 16 times 5 is 80. 16 times minus 5 would be minus 80. So 4 times 4 times minus 5 would be minus 80. But this is where we might go wrong, because we've got a minus 80, but we've got another minus that was just in the formula. So we get 9 minus minus 80. Minus minus together make plus. So that's the same as 9 plus 80, which is 89. So I'll replace that with an 89. And that gives us our two solutions. X equals minus 3 plus root 89 all divided by 8, or minus 3 minus root 89 all divided by 8. So I'm going to get onto my scientific calculator now and see what we get for that. And here we are on my whiteboard. So 4x squared plus 10x minus 3 equals 0. We've got 4x squared, so a equals 4. We've got 10x, so b equals 10. And we've got minus 3 on the end, so c equals minus 3. I'm going to stick all of those numbers into my formula. X equals minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to start with the a's. So a equals 4. Wherever I've got an a, I'm going to replace it with a 4. So a 4 there on the bottom, a 4 in there, 4, squeeze that in. That's the A's. The B's. B is 10, so wherever I see a B, I'm going to replace it with a 10. So minus B becomes minus 10. B squared becomes 10 squared. And then finally the C, I'm going to replace with a minus 3. Just stick it in brackets so that I don't lose track of the minus. Okay, let's tidy this up. 2 times 4, that's 8. 10 squared, that's 10 times 10, which is 100. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 3 is 48. So 4 times 4 times minus 3 will be minus 48. So we've got to be a little bit careful here, because we got a minus 48, but there was already a minus in the formula. So you get 100 minus minus 48. Minus minus makes plus. So that's the same as 100 plus 48, which is obviously 148. So we're going to get our two answers. Let's just move the 8 over a bit. From minus 10 plus or minus the square root of 148 all divided by 8. So in other words, x equals minus 10 plus square root of 148 divided by 8, or minus 10 minus root 148 all divided by 8. Just about squeeze that in. So I will get over to my scientific calculator now and work on that. So I've put the first one in already, minus 10 plus square root of 148 all divided by 8, and that's given me this number, which I'm going to round to 0.3. So over to the iMaths 0.3, and then to get the other solution I just need to change that plus there for a minus, and that gives me this number, which is going to round to minus 2.8. So over to the iMaths and put in minus 2.8. Okay, on to the last question. 6x squared plus x minus 8 equals 0. So over to my board for that one. So I've written that equation out. We've got 6x squared, so a equals 6. We've got x on its own, which is just like having 1x, so b equals 1. And we've got minus 8 on the end, so c equals minus 8. So I'm going to take those values of a, b and c and stick them into the formula x equals minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we'll start with the a's. A is 6, so wherever I see an a, I'm going to replace it with a 6. So 2a becomes 2 times 6. 4ac becomes 4 times 6 times c, and that's the a's. B is 1, so replace all the b's with 1's. Minus b becomes minus 1. B squared becomes 1 squared, and that's all the b's. C is minus 8, so I'll replace this c here with a minus 8, which I will stick in brackets so that I don't forget the minus. Okay, let's tidy this up now. 2 times 6 is easy to do, that's 12. 1 squared is just 1 times 1, which is 1. So I'll just put a 1 there. Now, 4 times 6 times minus 8. 4 times 6 is 24. 24 times 8, let me just, 48, 96, 192. So 4 times 6 times minus 8 is minus 192. So I'll replace all that lot with minus 192. But we've got to be a bit careful here because there was a minus from minus 192, but there's another minus that was already there from the formula, b squared minus 4ac. So we've got two minuses. Two minuses make a plus, so that's the same as 1 plus 192. So in that square root sign, we get 193. So the whole thing is x equals minus 1 plus or minus square root of 193 all divided by 12. Okay, so I'm going to skip writing two lots there. I'm just going to get straight over to the scientific calculator because I think you've got the drill by now. So over to the scientific calculator. Okay, so the first solution is where we have minus 1 plus root 193 all over 12, and that gives us this value, which is going to round to 1.1. So I'll put that in on iMaths as 1.1. And then we get the other value from just changing that plus to a minus, and that gives us that number, which is going to round to minus 1.2. So over to iMaths, minus 1.2. So all that remains is to mark it. And that's a relief because I didn't fancy doing all of those again.